Hello and welcome to another Wild Earth travel presentation. Today we will be discovering the white continent Antarctica. And at Wild Earth we like to pitch ourselves as experts. There's actually been 5 of us who have travelled down to Antarctica, including the lovely Kylie, a reservation specialist who recently went down to Antarctica, and also the Falkland Islands and South Georgia.
Thanks, Nissa. I guess I just want to take this opportunity to share some of the details in the itinerary. I was lucky enough to travel down there last October and November. So a very exciting itinerary. So it's just an opportunity to run through my itinerary and all the details and hopefully inspire you to travel that way. So often Antarctica is considered a bucket list destination for a lot of people. And it's definitely been one of the highlights of my travel experiences. Although you can reach the Falklands and obviously Antarctica now via flights, visits to South Georgia are only possible via ship, so makes this itinerary just a little bit more special. Obviously here at Wild Earth we work with many different cruise operators that travel to Antarctica, and all of these will give you an opportunity to step on the continent and view some definitely magical scenery, while you're out Zodiac cruising. The Antarctic season runs from late October to late March, and each part of the season allows you to experience something a little bit different. So just depending on what your focus and interests are, we can obviously guide you on the best time of the season to travel. This map just gives you a little bit more detail of my itinerary. We embarked in Ushuaia and travelled through to the Falkland Islands and continued on to South Georgia, and then headed onto the Antarctic Peninsula. We crossed the infamous Drake Passage on the way back before disembarking in Ushuaia. Total itinerary time was 21 days, and just depending on the time of the season, the itinerary obviously may operate in reverse. And also, depending on the ship, there may be the option to include flights from either Buenos Aires or Santiago. That option can also include an additional pre-night's cruise accommodation. That option can be quite useful because it does obviously alleviate any potential travel-related delays arriving in Ushuaia for your embarkation. I chose to make my own way independently to Ushuaia, which just was great because it gave me some time to experience the town at the end of the world, as they call it. During my stay, I also visited the Tierra del Fuego National Park, which is only a short drive from Ushuaia. And that park, Tierra del Fuego, shares a border with Chile and has some very impressive landscapes. Ushuaia itself is a small town with a population of around 80,000. The average summer temperature is around 10 degrees Celsius, so it definitely prepares you well for the colder Antarctic temperatures. Also a great spot to purchase any last-minute essentials for your voyage. For my voyage pre-embarkation, we enjoyed a visit to Tierra del Fuego and a catamaran ride with lunch on board. That took us from Tierra del Fuego round to the port of Ushuaia, where we embarked the ship. After a day at sea, we arrived at the Falkland Islands to have our first experience of excursions in the wildlife that we're going to see more of during the voyage. We arrived at New Ireland and anchored at Coffin's Harbour. We had a walk of about 30 minutes, which took us to the western side of the island, and there was a really extensive albatross and penguin colony there. The black-browed albatross and rockhopper penguins all nest together on the rugged sea cliffs. It was a really fascinating opportunity to view the wildlife. Obviously, you need to keep a certain distance from them, but they just go about their day without even realising that you're there. Overnight, we progressed and arrived at Carcass Island, where the backdrop was quite reminiscent of New Zealand with the gorse bushes. Great opportunity to see how the locals lived in this area, and we were invited into one of the local homes for morning tea. In the afternoon, we relocated a short distance to Saunders Island. That had been identified by BirdLife International as an important bird area. There were many different species of birds and wildlife living alongside each other. And this is where we had our first sight of the king penguin. We were assured at the time that we were going to see plenty more during our voyage, which was definitely true. But it was a a real exciting time for everyone. Our final day in the Falkland Islands was spent in Stanley, the capital of the Falkland Islands. Very interesting stop, a great way to see how the people of the Falkland Island live in this remote location. And quite interesting to have everybody speaking with an English accent in such a remote spot down the bottom of Argentina. And also a visit to the local museum was very interesting, providing, you know, a lot of information and detail around the Falklands War happened in 1982. Our next destination obviously was South Georgia. We had a couple of days at sea before we arrived here. There were some promises of some fantastic wildlife sightings, and it definitely didn't disappoint. First day we stopped at Elsa Hole and Right Whale Bay. Elsa Hole was a popular spot for the Antarctic fur seals, as well as the king penguins. And Right Whale Bay was our first introduction to an impressive king penguin colony. Whereas we would find out not the largest that we would see on South Georgia. The next day, our first scheduled stop was the former whaling station of Grytviken, which was established in 1904 and finally closed in 1965. The site is very well known also as a final resting place of Sir Ernest Shackleton. We had a visit, obviously, to his famous grave site, including a toast to the infamous explorer. I found this particular site really interesting. Many of the structures have disappeared from Grytviken, but some still remained, including the local church and the manager's property, which has been turned into the local museum. And only a few people live in South Georgia, and most of them are just a short distance away at the King Edward Point Research Station. So just fascinating to see how the old whaling station operated, and obviously the way of life for the whalers that lived there at the time. Our last day in South Georgia came with the promise of more king penguins, and it definitely didn't disappoint. Our first stop was Gold Harbour, which wasn't the largest king penguin colony in South Georgia, but definitely gave us a taste of what was to come in the afternoon, which was St Andrews Bay, the largest king penguin colony on South Georgia. There were penguins as far as you could see, and the one thing that the photos obviously don't give you an impression of is the noise. There's just the cumulative chirping of all the penguins is quite loud, and they're just quite fascinating to stand and watch, and definitely something that you could have stayed at for a lot longer. Due to the forecast of bad weather, we started our journey to the Antarctic Peninsula. So we had a further 2 days at sea. The first sighting of land was Elephant Island, which is part of the South Shetland Islands. This is obviously made famous by Shackleton's Endurance expedition. After being stuck in ice and the sinking of the Endurance, the men used their lifeboats to make their way north towards the land. 3 months later, they arrived on Elephant Island, and 22 of the group remained there, while the rest continued in a small lifeboat to South Georgia for help. And in total, the group remained on Elephant Island for 137 days. When you see the conditions where they would have been staying, it was truly extreme. From Elephant Island, we continued on to Deception Island, and Deception Island is one of the most famous islands of the South Shetlands, as it is an active volcano. We anchored at Port Foster, the large sheltered harbour in a caldera that was formed by a previous volcanic eruption that flooded. This is also the site of some of the previous whaling stations that obviously have been damaged by volcanic eruptions over time. And our next 3 days were spent exploring the Antarctic Peninsula from Wilhelmina Bay, Niku Harbour, Paradise Bay, Kerrville Island, and Forneria Bay. Our first excursion off the ship was a Zodiac cruise, where the local customs or ship crews stopped us to provide hot chocolates to enjoy while exploring. Humpback whales were spotted amongst the many beautiful icebergs, and the stunning colours of the icebergs were just amazing. and the afternoon we spent exploring Willamina Bay by ship, and obviously journeyed through quite a bit of sheet ice during that time, which was fascinating to see. At Nico Harbour, we visited a penguin of Gentoo, visited a colony of Gentoo penguins. Their colony had an impressive backdrop of glaciers and fresh snow, which made the visit quite idyllic. We had to obviously maintain our distance and stick to a designated path that the expedition crew had set. However, the penguins just seemed to continue on with their day, and would occasionally just stop and look up at you and almost appear as to wonder why you were there and where you'd come from. An afternoon zodiac through Paradise Bay completed the day, and after dinner we were lucky enough to experience the Lemire Channel at sunset. And unfortunately, the photos don't quite do it justice, but the atmosphere there during that time was amazing. On our final day in the peninsula, we had a shore visit planned. However, due to the shifting ice, that wasn't possible. So the expedition crew quickly organised a Zodiac cruise for us, which was just fascinating because it was just a harbour full of icebergs. So was very interesting, along with viewing of whales and swimming penguins. And then, luckily enough, the afternoon provided perfect conditions where we were able to get out on the kayaks. Definitely not somewhere that you would imagine that you would ever be kayaking, but the conditions were absolutely perfect for it. Our last stop on our journey back to Ushuaia was Livingston Bay in the South Shetland Islands, and a visit to a chinstrap penguin colony. From there, we made our way across the infamous Drake Passage to Ushuaia. We were very lucky enough to have the weather conditions for Drake Lake not shake. And then on our arrival back into Ushuaia a couple of days later, was in time for dinner on board, and we disembarked the following morning. And then on disembarkation, the group had some time at Ushuaia before being transferred back to the airport for their flight. And I continued on with my journey that day as well. So during this voyage, I was fortunate enough to travel on the National Geographic Explorer with National Geographic Lindblad Expeditions. They have an extensive history of expedition travel around the world, but particularly in Antarctica. They have recently celebrated the 60th anniversary of the first voyage Lars Erik Lindblad led to Antarctica. We had a very qualified expedition team on board that also included underwater specialists that were regularly diving during our voyage and sharing viewed videos. The photography team were always on hand to instruct and even provide an introduction to smartphone photography for those of us using their cell phones to capture their experiences. And we also had regular presentations from the expedition team, especially during the sea days. These were always really comprehensive, educational, interesting, and even at times quite humorous. And the National Geographic Explorer is a purpose-built expedition ship. She's fully stabilised ice class with a ice-reinforced hull. I would describe her as a classic expedition vessel, very comfortable, plenty of space, with a maximum capacity of 148 passengers. This voyage was fully inclusive, so all excursions were included activities such as kayaking. With some of the other expedition ships that visit the area, activities such as kayaking may be available for additional charge, and it just depends on the ship. We received a purpose-made jacket for the voyage. So this had an insulated underlayer with a waterproof outer layer. Waterproof pants are definitely required for these voyages, as well as boots. Both of these are available to rent for the duration of the voyage. I provided my own pants, but rented the boots, and these were on my cabin on arrival, so very easy to process. They were then collected at the end of the voyage and returned. What is offered in terms of clothing, etc., can differ between different expedition vessels, and it's something that we can advise you on. If perhaps your vacation time doesn't allow for a 21-day itinerary, but you still like to visit the White Continent, we do offer shorter peninsula-only itineraries, or if your sea legs won't allow a crossing of the Drake Passage, we also have some itineraries that include the flights across the Drake Passage, landing on King George Island. And alternatively, we also have some options for travel to the Ross Sea area of Antarctica that depart from New Zealand.
We often get asked, how fit do you need to be, and what is it an age limit for Antarctica?
Definitely not an age limit. I would suggest in terms of activity, if you're capable of walking up and down a flight of stairs, then you should be fine. Obviously, you need to be able to get in and out of the zodiacs. That includes from the ship and obviously once on shore. But if you have any concerns about any of your level of activity or the fitness required, just let us know. Obviously, we can run through that with you.
And we have a lot of travellers who are travelling by themselves and they want to know if they have the opportunity to have a trip like that.
Absolutely. I travelled on my own, and on board the ship, there were a number of solo travellers. Absolutely not a problem. You do find that you will gravitate to a group of friends and make friends along the way. So definitely not to be concerned if you're traveling on your own, because it definitely isn't an issue, and there are plenty of other people traveling single on board as well. So you definitely be able to make some new friends.
A lot of our travellers, like when they're over that side of the world, maybe think might do some extra locations. It might be a bit different and hard to get to. Which ones would you recommend?
Definitely South Georgia. If you can make that, then that's definitely worthwhile, I think, just because of the difficulty in getting to that location. I think if you can add it into your itinerary, it's definitely worthwhile.
Yeah. In like the Patagonian fjords.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, Patagonian fjords are a big area. In fact, Argentina itself, has many national parks, and Chile being so close as well. It's perfect. Antarctica voyage is perfect to add into perhaps a greater South America itinerary. Absolutely.
Maybe even the Galapagos.
Definitely. Yes. Thank you for your time. For the voyage to Antarctica is a bucket list trip for you, please contact us. We'd be happy to help.